Dr. Sharif Abdullah offers a unique, hopeful, and visionary perspective on the persistent challenges of our time. His perspective is shaped by his urban upbringing of poverty and violence, his Ivy League education, and his work with impacted communities in America and in 45 countries around the world. His spiritual outlook is rooted in the consciousness of dozens of religions, faith traditions, and spiritual practices. Sharif offers this unique viewpoint, helping us chart a course that explains where we've been, where we are now, and how we get to a positive future that works for all living beings.
Hello, Sharif here. And today I want to talk to you about something that is hard for me to talk about, and I expect to get some, not so much pushback, but attack behind this. And that has to do, again, with the nature of the problems or the nature of the issues that we have to deal with. I want to illustrate that in a very graphic way. Let's take two of the most famous black men in America, one of them being Barack Obama, and the other one being George Floyd. I'm going to invite you to think about what is the difference between these two gentlemen. What's the difference between Barack Obama, became the first black president of the United States. Even the people who didn't like his policies and his politics talked about him being, a gentleman and a true intellect, etc., etc. The other man being George Floyd, who was brutally murdered in the middle of the street by police officers who had come for a call that he was attempting to pass a counterfeit $20 bill. Now, one part of our society wants to say that there's no difference between them. He's just a black man, and it could have been Barack Obama if Barack had been trying to pass a bad $20 bill that day. I disagree, and I deeply disagree, and saying that means that you don't see the real problem. And the real problem is uncomfortable for us. I want to talk about the issue of privilege. And when the word privilege comes up, we're usually talking about how white people are privileged in this society. But today I want to talk about a black privilege. I have the privilege of never ever being referred to as poor black trash. People don't say that. And people who do say that, something bad happens to them. Okay, they get fired or they get demoted or there's a lawsuit or something. But that's generally not a term that gets used. Although poor white trash can appear in the New York Times and nobody even blinks behind that. The reason that George Floyd was killed, the reason that all of the other blacks that have been killed by the police is not just because they're black. It's because they are part of an underclass that we as a society don't want to recognize even exists. They're part of an underclass that we just simply want them to go away. And we want to focus on the Barack Obamas of the world, the Oprah Winfreys of the world, the people that are certified in some way as being acceptable to the mainstream society. Now, I have the unique privilege and the unique obligation to actually belong to both classes. I was born, I was raised, and all the way up until the time I went to college in America's underbelly, in the poorest of the poor communities, on welfare, in public housing, in the hostile environments of the inner city in Camden, New Jersey. I then went to the best Ivy League schools in America, and I learned an awful lot in those schools. I learned a couple of different, well, I learned psychology, I learned law, and I learned how to talk. And before I went to college, my language was, I tell folks I went to the Samuel L. Jackson School of Diction, and um, and not just my language, how I walked, how I talked, how I stood up and walked across a room, how I made eye contact, how I smiled, um, my clothing, the vehicle that I drove, all of these things say something to the world. All of these things say, in very subtle ways, ways that you don't really think about, what class you're in. Well, here in America, we live in a society that doesn't recognize class at all. Here in America, we live in a society where you can pretend to be in another class by borrowing your way out of it. So I can drive more car than I can afford. I can live in a bigger house than I can afford. I can just kind of go up that ladder. And when you interact with all points of authority, you interact having a coded language, and that coding says, oh, he's not with them. This isn't part of the poor black trash here. So once you acknowledge that that group exists, that there is a black underclass, you can see a couple of things that happens. Number one, you can target the behavior. You can stop painting every white person in America as a racist. Okay. Now, hasten to say, each and every white person in America has been tainted with race. Each and every male in this society, including me, has been tainted by sexism. I've done a lot to get rid of that burden from my heart. Am I perfect on that? No. Do I have a lot more to go with that? Yes. Am I going to feel guilty about that? Hell no. Because we're in a process. I have not found the perfect person in that process in all of my years in this country. We are all improving. Well, that was a little bit too much. Some of us don't want to improve. Some of us are fine where we are. But for most of us, all of us, if you point something out, it's like, yeah, okay, I see that that's an issue. I'm going to work on it. If you go searching for some issues out in left field with me, I'm going to say, wait, hold it. There's other fish to fry here. There's other things that we should be focusing on together, as opposed to trying to make me or any one of us perfect. However, all of us have an interaction with this black underclass. Most of those interactions are not good. A lot of the people who are actually saying Black Lives Matter aren't talking about that underclass. They're talking about something else. I think that it's really important to say that all of us need to change with regard to the black underclass. But I think that we also need to say that the black underclass also has to change. I forget what book this was in. This is some years ago that I read it. But a woman told a story about having, she had 2 fish in a small goldfish bowl. And she had to clean the goldfish bowl and had no place to put the fish. So what she did is she ran about a foot of water in her bathtub and poured the fish into the bathtub and cleaned the fish bowl. And when she went back to get the fish, she saw that the fish were circling each other as though they were still in the bowl. They were outside of the glass bowl, but there was another bowl, and that bowl was in their minds and in their hearts. And until they got rid of the bowl that's in their mind and in their heart, they were going to continue to act a particular way. Until you get rid of the ghetto that's in your own mind, the ghetto of limitation. I don't mean black community, I mean ghetto, the negative inferences that are in your own mind, in your own heart. Until you do that, people will treat you a particular way. And I said this some years ago to my daughters. We were driving in. I was driving. They were in the car, and we were adults at the time. And I made a bad turn on bad move on a highway. Georgia State Troopers pull me over, and they're starting to get twitchy. And I said, nothing bad is going to happen to me. When I rolled down the window and started talking with the officer, I knew the language to speak. I knew the forms to give him, how to, not just the forms, but how to give him the forms that let him know that I respected him, and also let him know that I respected myself. Didn't get a ticket. Be more careful. Thanks a lot. Have a safe evening. Goodbye. Now, if I did not respect myself, think about how that interaction would go down. If my lack of respect for myself would not allow me to respect him, think of how that interaction would go down. So we do have to teach a white community how to understand how the bones of racism exist in each of us. The bones of sexism exist in each one of us. But how do we also teach the black underclass community that if you are expecting respect, start giving it to yourself first. If you are expecting to be treated like a full citizen, then start treating yourself as a full citizen first. And these two things go hand in hand. And once we get to that point, then we can start seeing some things in a really, really different way. And we can start proposing things. And instead of just saying, take the guns away from the cops, okay, that does something. But is it the thing that you want in order to get to the core issue of should we have an underclass of any kind? A black underclass, a white underclass, an Hispanic underclass. I think that we need to start recognizing how we've structured our society and do some really good work toward eliminating that and doing the restructuring. So thank you. And we're going to talk some more about this because I think that this is a very, very important issue. So thank you.
You are invited to participate in the discussions and activities that will define a positive future for all. We are at the cusp of the expansion of our human consciousness, beyond the limitations of our past. Together, we can envision a world that embraces our human potential. Together, we can create a world that can truly work for all living beings.